Howdy, Sergey.
Hello.
How's it going?
Well, it's good because I'm gonna see something awesome.
You're about to see something awesome. And you just got done recording your demo. So
Yes.
it's
So
time.
I want to see like how more awesome Playwright can be.
Awesome. Well, let's do this. I'm excited to demo off my Playwright demo around creating test data. Can you see this?
Yes.
All right. So we are going to create some test data with Playwright today. And I hope that this walkthrough, this presentation, really just shows you what all Playwright can do. I once had a really smart person tell me that Playwright is a lot like a box of Legos. That was you, Sergey, if you don't remember. So it's like Legos. You can build anything you want with it. And hopefully, just walking through the demo today, you can see some different ways you can build up test data through different API calls. So if you want to follow along at home with me, RESTful Booker platform, Playwright branch, because I haven't merged that in. So this is a fork of the RESTful Booker platform. And rather than just build something outside of this tool, which you can totally do, I decided that this data creation tool should actually live inside the repo. So I created a fork. I've imported, or I created a Playwright folder. Within that Playwright folder, I've got everything I need to get going. Just know that you don't need all this stuff. Really, the only files that you do need are this data creator file, your package.json files, and this playwright config.ts, which is really important, along with the files in the lib folder, which is where we're going to live. But for our purposes, I've got this README. Feel free to follow along. I'm just going to tell you high level, my approach, what I did, and then we'll dive into the code and walk through that. The first thing I did was I needed to become an expert in this product, right? So what do? You go explore. I am a big believer in that the best people to write automation are people that understand the product. So sorry if I offend you. If you're one of those people that's like, just give me a bunch of test cases and I'll go automate them. I would encourage you to take a step further and say, let me go learn the product. Maybe there's some test cases that exist, but there's probably some test cases that are being missed because we all think differently. We all test things differently. And I would just encourage you to go deeper and embrace the product, be an expert in the product. Because when you do that, you can actually make the best decisions, create the best strategies on how you're going to write automation against the product. So when I was exploring the product and trying to become an expert, I looked at the top candidates. One was to create rooms by an admin. Another side was to create bookings, either unauthenticated, right, from the end user calendar side, which creates a notification, or bookings created by an admin. So you can kind of book on the front end and you can book on the back end. And those are different because one's unauthenticated and one's authenticated. So which means you have to be logged in. And then also looked at the contact us form, which would basically generate a bunch of notifications on the back end. And when I was looking into that, I decided, hey, I'm going to focus on rooms and I'm going to focus on bookings specifically. So I'll let you read this more if you want. But one caveat here is the way I've built this stuff is it's not the snappiest, right? So if I'm looking to get like 100,000 records, I would probably not use this method to go about it. I would probably either work directly with SQL, or I would work with my developers and say, hey, Dev, I know that we have a create rooms endpoint. Is there any way we can create like a data creator within that endpoint? Maybe it's a private endpoint that you can expose to me where I can go like pass in something like create rooms, and I pass it some rooms and it goes and does some magic. So just that's one caveat. But if you're looking to test with like 100 rooms or 50 rooms or 10 rooms, like this is a great way to get some of that data so you can start exploring some different scenarios and use the system with different types of data sets. So I started there, and I created a room, and then I'm not going to walk through all of this, but let's just jump right in to the code. And I am going to keep this up over here. because this is the site we're actually automating against, or writing tests against this site. So this site is automationintesting.online. It does get reset every 10 minutes. So it's possible that as I'm creating data, maybe stuff gets reset and it disappears. That's on purpose. And that's expected, the way this is set up. So let's jump in to our code. All right, so here we've got our Playwright directory. And the first thing I did before creating anything was I wanted to manually interact with the API using Playwright. So I actually first started by creating a test. And I decided, hey, I want to be able to get an auth token easily. So I actually built a little fixture that I could go pass in a username and password, and it would basically create, make a post call to the auth login with username and password, and it would return to me a token. So this is basically some magic that gets that done. If you want a walkthrough, go watch Sergey Gapanovich's demo, because he did something very similar, even though we didn't do it at the same time. We weren't pairing. It was just our brains think alike. So I go create this token. I assign it to token. And before each, I went ahead and hard coded some stuff. So I'm hard coding a room name. I'm hard coding a room type. I'm setting, this is dynamic. I'm saying, hey, is this true or false? I've got a room image and a description. I'm just passing in a TV and a room price. And so this is my before each. So before each of these tests, which I think I only have one in here, it's going to go set up these variables. And here I'm basically making a post request to room, and I've got some assertions down here, which pretty straightforward. Also this is not done, so let's ignore that. But by default, this is the way I learned, what are the ins and outs? How does authentication work? This was my proof of concept. But this is not really the problem we're trying to solve, right? We're not trying to solve the post room. We want to post multiples. So I guess maybe we could actually say, well, what if we just run this thing like 10 times? Like it'll create 10 rooms, right? Let's just make sure that room got created. Oh, it did get created. So I can run it again. And it should create a third one, which, is handy dandy. We're creating stuff via the API, but this is just one, right? And this is really like a test. So this is not going to run all the time. So what I wanted to do was, the next step was like, hey, I need a way to create 10 rooms or 5 rooms. So I started by taking the approach of, if I were to do a get rooms call, maybe at the beginning of that get rooms call, I'd want to go create some data, right? So this one fixture or function that's out there, it's called create rooms. I can pass it an amount, which is a number, and that rooms API lives in my lib folder, data factory rooms.ts. And you can see I'm importing Playwright. I'm importing my get auth token because I want to do that on this page in case I'm unauthenticated. I'm importing Faker, which is a library to generate fake data. And I'm importing this .env, or I'm just, initializing this. And this allows me to use a .env file for any of my hard-coded data, right? So if I wanted to hard-code usernames or dynamically save usernames and kind of use them throughout any of my tests, this allows me to do that. What's really cool is I could also build these tests where if I did want to run on my local, all I've got to do is comment this out and uncomment this, or I can uncomment these and actually test against like the raw port of each endpoint that's set up. I've got logic in some of the files where I can do that. But we're not going to take too much time on that. So my create room is basically, once I figured out how to create a room, I programmatically did that. So this is my rooms data factory method. And from that, I actually created 2 different functions. I create room function and a create rooms function. So create room was the easier of the 2, and that lives right here. So I am basically saying get an auth token, set a room name to room number. Or if I don't pass one in, I actually want to generate a random one. That's, I think this is like 4 number places or whatever, right? And then a room price between 110 and 125. There's the faker lets me generate fake data. I've got it could be a cat image, or it could be this nice image that we'll see in a minute. And then, so this is me kind of setting up my, the inputs that I want to use. And then this is me actually making the request. So I kind of initialize the request through this create request context. I set response equal to the post. So when this post and it comes and it returns, it is going to be set to the response. So a post to the room API with whatever URL we've got set, with the token, which was generated before, with the room name, with some, with the different type, there's some more fun math here. Accessible, I'm going to pass in the image, which is that string, a description, which Faker's generating, and then a feature array. So I've got a feature array. I think that's up here. So Wi-Fi refreshments. Again, this is not like abstracted to another file, but you could easily do that. Again, go see Sergey's demo. And then a random, a room price. And then once that's done, even though this is not like a test where I'm doing a whole lot of assertions, I do want to make sure I get the right response back. So like if for some reason, like it got a bad response, like it would alert me, hey, the response didn't equal what you expected. So, there's a problem. Then I take the response body. I set that from the response.json, and then I return that body to whatever called it. So if I wanted to go do assertions, I could do that. So this is the create room API. So if I were to call create room and I just pass it a room number, it would go create one room and then just be done. But we want to create rooms, multiple rooms. So what we've got down here is a new function called create rooms. You pass in one parameter, which is amount. And I start with the number created is 0. And then I've got this for loop. This is some JavaScript magic that basically says, keep counting until you get to the number we're expecting, or till this number is less than the number we're expecting. So, and each one we're kind of iterating. So we're, it's counting up as we go. So if I say create 10 rooms, it's going to go through this logic 10 times before it completes. And then at the end, when it does kind of break out of that loop, I'm going to present successfully created, how many we created rooms. So let's run this and see what it looks like. There's 2 different ways I could run this. I could go to my create room spec, and maybe under this get rooms, I could just do something like this, where I create a room and create 5. So this is probably the easiest way to kind of get started. So let's just refresh this and make sure that, all right, so we've got 3 right now. So I would expect after running this, we would have 8 rooms. So let's go run this check. And this is a fancy, see red. That's not great. I'm not sure why it's red. It's all green. That's tricky. All right. So created rooms. It looks like it actually ran. Let's go see if these exist. All right. There we got our single rooms. All right. They're all here. That's a fantastic picture, Mark. Thank you for giving that to us on the internet. Any questions, Sergey?
You said that there are 2 ways. And so the cool thing is that I see that not, you said the single room. No, every single room is different, right? Like some of this family, but you said that there are 2 ways to run it, and you run it from a spec.
Yep.
Right, from the test. So what would it be? And
What's
the
the other
test,
way? Okay. Yeah, great question. So really all I need to do is I need to find a way to call, create an asynchronous function. That's all I need to do. I need to call this line of code here. So I could easily go create another file anywhere. I could import that file. So import from lib data factory. So this is a data creator that lives on in my main directory. And all I'm going to do is, run this create rooms 10 times. So like, let's do it. Hopefully this doesn't cause too much chaos. But to run this, it's a little different, right? Because when I'm running a spec file, I can run it from this command, or I can run it down here from the command line, npx playwright test. And what this npx playwright test does is it does a lot of magic behind the scenes, right? This is actually utilizing a test runner that Playwright uses to go initialize everything, make sure everything's set up to run, grok through all the different things. So describe, test, and then actually execute that JavaScript. But if we're running this data creator outside of Playwright, we can actually still use the Playwright library without using the runner. So that's really important. In this scenario, we're using the Playwright library, even though it says Playwright test. We're using that outside of actually using the test runner. Okay. So this is where like Playwright is like Legos, like you can build anything. Most of the time we want to use the test runner because we want the reporting and retries and videos and all that stuff that comes with it. But sometimes we just want to run some like HTTP requests, and I don't care if they passed or failed. I want to go create some data. So in that scenario, this is really all you need. You don't need any of this. Import, create rooms from data room, create rooms. I'm passing in 10. And to run this, because we're using TypeScript, you have to, and I've installed this in the package.json, but you have to install TS node. And that's basically an executable on your local data creator. I'm going to run that. It's going to go execute this file. So it's going to import the stuff, execute any of the code that's called in that file. And it's going to tell me, hey, I successfully created 10 rooms. Let's go check it. All right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We've got 10. Rock and roll. If we wanted to make sure this works, we could easily just go change that picture from whatever was there before. We need to go to not our spec, but our room. Let's go just take this out. We'll just create like a fake cat picture because cat pictures are fun. And let's actually just change this to, let's just create 2 cat rooms, right? Can we call it that? All right, executing the command, it created 2 rooms, and I should expect some test data with some beautiful cats appear on the screen. That is beautiful. It works.
It works. Yeah, we can confirm it works.
Yep.
But I have a question. So we're just creating data, right? So we're not actually testing if we can, live with the load or like survive the load.
Yep.
But when you create them, do you create one and wait for it to finish and then you create a new one, or it happens just?
Great question. So the way I've written this is I am, because this is an asynchronous function, and because this is a for command and this create room is asynchronous, we are waiting for the responses to finish before we go to the next. So if you wanted to like blast the server, which you could just change up the way we called these and just remove the awaits. And it would go a whole lot faster, but I'm not ready to do that because I haven't tried that on demo day, but it should work.
I bet it will work.
I bet it would too. But if you're doing any kind of assertions, like things would fail, right? So if I made an assertion down here, this actually may fail because, well, this wouldn't fail because it would wait for it to come back, but it would work. It would work, but we're not going to do it. But if you wanted to go really fast, you can definitely do that. And you're not waiting for every single thing to complete. But sometimes it's best to kind of wait on that. It just depends on what you need, but it's flexible.
Yeah. So let's say I'm a new hire and we have this script and I'm like, hey, Butch, I need 10 rooms. How can I do this? But so it seems like I have to open some files and change the numbers. Is there a way to just maybe through the terminal to say, oh, like run it, but I need only 10, or run it and I need only 2?
Yes, there is. I'm not prepared to talk about that. So I will tell you for certain, there are ways to do that. I've never I could easily go set that to an environment variable, right? And I pass that in as an environment variable into the test and have it done. But really the with this TS node application, there's probably better ways to actually create like a CLI tool that would actually use the data creator in the backend. So you'd probably have to build something on top of it if you wanted it to be really extensible and to have like help functions and stuff like that. But that's not something I took on here, but that sounds like a fun challenge. We should do that.
Well, you should. You should definitely
Just
because
just not live on the stream. How about that?
well, yeah, my first approach was like, wait, but you can just say, environment variable. You can set it to like 1 or something, and then you just pass it. But yeah, well,
You could totally do that. You could
you
totally do
can
that.
totally
That
do
would
it.
not be very difficult either. Or you could set defaults, right? So I could come to my env, set a default here, and then by default it will create it, or I can override it. And really that would just be a matter of when I, setting the default input here on the data creator, and then on the room side, it would be saying, hey, take the amount, or if the amount is null, like you can pass in process.env dot room creation needs. I don't know. Naming is so
Yeah.
hard. Like there's a good way to do it, but we're not going to get into that. Let me show you something even cooler.
Okay.
All right, you ready for this?
Well, no, but I'll be ready.
You're ready. All right.
I'm scared. Yes.
Don't be scared. So let's say we're here and cool. We've got like 50 rooms that we can go test with. Well, like really the main functionality is not, hey, how many rooms can I have? Like when you're testing something, like I want to go look at something really interesting like this that has a lot of things you can interact with, where you can go book different times with different people and different names. And yeah, I know it's test data, right? Oh, I've got a successful booking. Now I can go look at that thing and now see, hey, this thing is unavailable, right? So what if we can actually build a tool that would generate bookings for us off of any room that either we created or that exists? How cool would that be?
That would be interesting.
You think so?
Yes.
Let me show you this thing. It's amazing. All right, here we go. So we've created a room. We've created rooms. Um, the next challenge that I went down is, hey, how can we create a booking, right? So here's like just a little bit of this is a little bit of like future. You can see some magic.
Yeah.
I created a function to do get bookings. I created a function to do future open check-in date. So I could find like return to me like what the future check-in date for a room ID would be. I also created a create booking where I pass it a date basically, and it would basically say it would go create a booking, or I could create a future booking, and the future booking uses some of the get booking and open check-in dates. It kind of mixes them to like build the things. So before we get going too crazy, let's just run this thing. Let's run this thing and see what happens. So this create future bookings is expecting a room ID and an amount. And the amount is going to be the amount of days I want to book for, I believe. Let me just run this thing and see what happens. So room ID
Yeah.
1, I'll just go ahead and tell you it's the single room. That's room ID 1. All right, so let's go run this thing. I'm running the same file, just with this uncommented, other stuff commented out. And you see I got some I've got some fancy
Ooh. I see
yeah, so this
bookings.
is the I said amount. It's the amount of bookings we were going to create. So I this is all printed out just for my testing. Eventually I would uncomment this stuff out, but by default I'm saying the booking length is 2. When I say that, let's see. Maybe that's something that I've got hard coded somewhere. Check-in string, check-out string, and then it basically does a booking. Oh, okay. So I think I have all this stuff randomly generated. So it's basically saying, find an opening in the future, um, book it, and then the next time go find a new opening, book it, go find a new opening, book it. And if I go look at this data here, you can see now we have some really fun test data. And some of this stuff is random because I started from today and in the future, because who's going to book something in the past? That doesn't make sense, even though you can QA'd. But let's say I wanted to say, hey, if I have bookings or I only have one day available, can I actually book this slot from the front end, from the back end? I basically have some really nice, somewhat random test data. Some of this loops over the weekend, some of it doesn't. Maybe you want to test like different room rates, if those change. Like, I've got a tool now that can go create this data for me in a random manner, or I could program it to be not random if that's what I needed. Now I can be a better explorer. I can go find those bugs in the system that automation's never going to uncover, or maybe it will if you're like, but it's much easier to find it by exploring, right? If we have different scenarios. So this is the, using automation in our testing, which I'm a big fan of that phrase. Any questions?
Well, what happens if it falls on September 20th or September 24th and it's unavailable? So is it smart enough?
Great question. Great question. Yeah. So let's test that. Let me just make sure. Okay, it reset. So let me go create some new data. I'm going to only create 3 bookings. All right. So room 1, 3 different bookings. We're going to test that here. And now I've got something booked today, something booked here, something booked here. So you're asking the question, what happens if it tries to book something here? Because we're starting date today, right?
Yeah.
So what I've built this to be able to, we'll do 5 more bookings. I built this to say, which I'll walk through the code. I want to book something in the future. Give me the most future date and then start there. So what's the most future checkout date that exists in the system? And then go from there. So it starts with, let's get today. If that doesn't exist, if it does exist, go use that. So you can see out of our bookings, it started on 8/29 with this data. So basically said, hey, there's a book out date. Maybe I actually had it I gave it a little pad or something. But if I go refresh this now, it's always going to book in the future. So it started with 8/28, even though the last available was 27th. So that's something I thought through. But again, I could easily go change that and change that logic as we go look at the code. So let's take a look there. And we'll spend the bulk of our time looking here as well. So here we go. No, this is not the right thing. I'm going to go look at the booking data factory library. All right. So I'm not sure why that's here. That should not be there. We'll fix that, commit that later. Thank you, VS Code, for letting me know. So I'm importing Playwright spec. I'm importing my auth data factory. That was the first thing I built. It makes me not have to worry about getting a token. And then I import this string date by days. So this was a little helper that I created / stole from Sergey's work in our company repo, because we built this over there. And then Faker. And then we've got our .env. So when I call this bookings file, there's a couple different ways I can interact with it, but the specific way is to create future bookings. So what I'm going to do is start there, and we're going to work our way back. So let me go find this method here. This is an asynchronous function, and the input parameters are room ID and an amount, right? So this is it's TypeScript. That's why you see these numbers and stuff here. So this is a function. I pass in this stuff, and I do a for loop, right? The good thing is I just wrote a for loop in the room creator, so I had a pretty good idea of how to do that. And the first thing I'm going to do is call await create a booking with a room ID, and I'm passing in a future open check-in date for that room ID. So we're kind of like calling another method within a method. And I'm going to iterate through that as many times as there are, as many times as the amount is passed in. So if I pass it in 10 times, I'm going to iterate through this 10 times. So let's go look and see first off, what this create booking method does. And let me just open this up to the right. Hopefully so this is our create booking function that we are calling from inside of this function over here. So let me just zoom this down, zoom this up so we can see it. So we've got our create booking, we're passing it a room ID, and we're passing it in this other thing that we're going to find out what it is. So room ID is important. That's going to be a number. And then we're also wanting to pass it a check-in date. So this is pretty basic. If I want to create a booking, I need an ID and I need what date do I want to start. And then I can come up with a plan on how I want to, close the booking. But start is, what I would decide to trigger off of. I create a random booking length. So every time this is iterated through, it's going to go create a different number between 1 and 4. And then a random check-in delay. So the check-in delay is going to be how long should it wait between the last checkout and today. So if it gets back 0, it's going to book right up next to the checkout. And if it gets 2, it's going to book 2 days out. So again, you can tweak these, they're not parameterized at that level, but you can tweak them in the code to get the data you need, which I thought was pretty fun testing with. And then, we're getting a token and then adding some randomness into future check-in dates. So there are gaps. So I say, hey, check-in date, which is what we're passing in, set the date to check-in date, get date, plus a random check-in delay. So I'm basically saying, give me the date and then add 0 or 2 to it. And because this is a date object, you basically +1 means tomorrow date object, +2 is 2 days from now date object. And then I get this check-in string and I set the check-in date. I print that out to a string, and then I take off that T gobbledygook to make it usable and readable. And now I have a check-in string that I can actually use to pass in. Actually pop it out here, but I could also, generate more additional things here. So this next function is to get a date, random days from the check-in date. So this is like for future check-in dates. This is our checkout. So check-in, checkout. And for here, I'm doing a string date by IDs. So this is that really fun function that we created. You can go read about it more. But this is where I can pass it a date. I can pass it how many days we want it to be different. So add some days or subtract some days. And I'm basically passing in the check-in date. And then I'm passing in the random booking length. So between 1 and 4. So I'm kind of like building on top of each other. Again, when I first wrote this code, it didn't look like this. When I first wrote this code, it was very much like hard coded. And then I went back and said, hey, let's make this random. Let's make this random as I built it through. Then I console log this stuff, booking length, check in a string. So we saw that down here. And then from here, now that I've got all the data, now I can build my booking body. So this is just an object in JavaScript. Room ID equals the room ID that is passed in. First name, I fake it. Last name, I fake it. Deposit paid. I just set it to true. You could, set that to random if you wanted to. I just random email, random phone number, had to be like 11 characters or something. That was annoying, but we did it. Over here in the States, it's 10 digits, but that's okay. No hate. Booking data. This is the check-in and check-out. So this is the stuff that we generated up here. And then we're actually using the Playwright library, not the test runner, but the library to go do a post to the booking URL passing in the headers and then passing in the data with the booking body, which we generated up here. We wait for it. We log it because I needed to see it logged. We can probably remove this now. And we return the body if we need anything to do with it. So this body gets returned. So going backwards, this body gets returned when this create booking happened. We don't do anything with it, but we could if we wanted to. So one other thing that we do is, this await future open check-in date. So this is kind of some of the magic that happens. This is just another bit of code that I wrote to make sure that we're always booking in the future. And here I'm basically getting a current bookings. So I'm doing a get bookings from the room ID we passed in. And this current bookings, I think, comes back as just a JSON body. I think it's what comes back. Let's just make sure. All right, we're getting the response body. So it's an object that we can actually go do something with. That's not where I'm going to go. I want to go back here. And I get a checkout array, which I'm saying, hey, create a new checkout array, just new array. So it's empty array right here. And then I iterate through the current bookings and get the checkout dates. So I make this, I find the check-in body. I go to bookings.length. I see what is the length of those things. I had to iterate through it this way because I may not have gotten if I booked something 4 months in the future, it would be like ID 2. And if I book something tomorrow, it'd be ID 3. And if I book something so what would happen, like the first way I tried it, is it would actually get the last ID that returned, which may be tomorrow. And it's like, hey, in the future, you're going to hit an issue and you're not going to be able to book. So I said, hey, give me all the gets and then iterate through and find me, basically create them. And then if today is greater than checkout, is do nothing, else push it to this array. And then in this array, I get the most future date, because naming is hard and that's the best name I could come up with. And I do this JavaScript magic, which I think after looking and reading, I think there might even be a more cooler way to do this. But I'm basically sorting the array, and I'm basically I'm ordering it by the latest at the end, and then I'm doing a pop at the end. And that pop basically says, hey, take the last item, move it out of the array, and return it as a string. So I basically have a string of a new date, or if that doesn't work, I just maybe if that's null, it would come back and say, hey, just get me today's date if it can't find the futuremost date. And then I return the futuremost date, and that's where on the future check-in date where all that stuff happens. So that's it. It's a little wild, but it's pretty consistent. So let's run one other test just to see, let's go over the power of this. Let's go ahead and create 2 rooms. And rather than us booking room ID 3, let's actually create some bookings for room 1, room 2. We're going to create 1 for 1, 2 for 2, and 10 for 3. Because numbers. All right, here we go. So now what should happen is I should create room ID 2, room ID 3, and I'm going to go book all the different rooms. Let's see what happens. Going to take a minute, play some Jeopardy music. All right, so I don't have crazy console logs, but I do see some bookings are happening. All right, let's go take a look at our data. All right, we got some cat rooms. So book room 1 reservation. Oh, don't do that. Room 2, you see these cat photos change. That's kind of on purpose. 1, 2 reservations. Let's look at room 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Why are there 14? I'm not sure why there's 14. 1, 2, 3. No,
Maybe
1,
20 to
2,
23 is one.
3,
Yeah.
4, 5. I think I was counting some of these wrong. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I think I counted some of these twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's on the first. There's really 10, even though I can't count. Any questions?
What was the hardest part?
Oh man, that is a great question. The hardest part for me was figuring out the logic I needed to book a room. And you can see all my comments because, I learned a lot of JavaScript by doing this, iterating through different things. The hardest part was not making an API call. That was actually the easy part. The hardest part was designing a strategy that should work in all the cases I wanted to create test data in, right? Which is days in the future, give me some randomness along that. But actually making the API call is pretty easy. It was more of the logic of what do I want the shape of my data to look like?
Nice. Well, I loved it.
Thank you,
I
Sergey.
personally loved it so much.
Yeah, I
I
hope
loved it.
you all enjoy it. And yeah, I would just encourage you, give Playwright a try. The documentation's great. It's pretty easy to get going. It just requires some time. And you're gonna bang your head on your keyboard a little bit, but like that's with anything you're learning, right? But as long as you're learning more each day, you'll get there. I started using this tool like in October. So it's not, 10 months ago or something. So it's powerful. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.